Hey everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I have a really fun ocean theme card to share with you. I created this for my nephew for his birthday this year, and I really like all the colors and I thought it turned out really nice. So I'm going to go through the process of how I made this card. So I'm starting with an A2 size folded card, just standard side fold, and then I have some mixed media cardstock that I'm going to use primarily to build the background. I'm going to use the Critters in the Sea stamp set and the coordinating die from Lawn Fawn for the critters. And then I'm also going to use some sentiments from the Lovable Legends stamp set from Lawn Fawn, mostly for the birthday sentiment. I have some circle border dies that I'm going to use, and then I have a piece of Nina Solar White cardstock to do my coloring for my Copic Coloring. And then because I'm doing the Copic Coloring, I'm going to use Memento Tuxedo Black ink to stamp my critters with. And for the background, I'm going to use a few distress inks. Here I have Vintage Photo, Peacock Feathers, Salty Ocean, and Chipped Sapphire. And so those will all be part of the blended background, and I have my circle blenders. And so I'm ready to get started. I'm going to start with the blended background first, and I do this for two reasons. I like to do the background because it's the broadest element, and so it sets the base or the tone for the art. And I also want to leave the most amount of time for the background to dry. So I like to do this first so that as it's drying, I can work on my Copic coloring. So I'm going to start with the Peacock Feathers first. And so just rubbing that in light circles and just I keep coming in until it's blended. It doesn't take too long. The distress inks are pretty buttery to work with and they blend pretty easily. I just want to build it up softly though, and I just keep building until I don't have any swirl marks, until any of the marks are pretty much faded away into the ink, and then I'm ready to come in with my next color. So I'm going to use the Salty Ocean next, and I'm going to start that in the middle and work it into the Peacock Feathers. And so I just want to meet them together at that baseline and softly blend the two of them together so that I get a nice blend between them. So these colors are really pretty together, and I thought they made really nice ocean colors and work as a nice base. They both have the same undertones and they're a little bit similar, but enough interest, enough difference that they give a little bit of visual interest. So now that I have the Salty Ocean down, I'm going to come back in with the Peacock Feathers and just blend that edge where they meet a little bit more, just to make it a little bit of a softer gradient between them. So I'm going to flip my card around. I want to add in the Chipped Sapphire. It's my darkest color, and I want that to be just at the edge ever so slightly. So I've put a piece of spare cardstock underneath my hand on the left so that I can hold my work in place, but I don't get any fingerprints on it because that ink really hasn't set yet, and so I could make some marks if I'm not careful. So you can see I'm building up the Chipped Sapphire, and it does come in kind of blotchy at first, but I just keep working the swirls and blending softly, just layer by layer, and it just evens itself out as it goes. And so I'm coming back in with the Salty Ocean just to blend the edge of where that Chipped Sapphire meets. And then I'm going to come in with the Chipped Sapphire one more time just to get it a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated and concentrated. And as well for this blend, I'm not just doing it straight across, but I'm adding a little bit of extra on each corner. So it kind of makes almost like a vignette gradient on that top edge. So this is looking really good. I like how that Chipped Sapphire has a little bit of purple in it. It just really brings out that one color. And so I've set that aside to dry, and I'm ready to work on my next piece. So I want to make the ocean floor for my card. I originally thought that I would take my circle die and use my biggest one and just create kind of a hill for the sand to be at the bottom. Now, as I'm looking at this, I still feel that that circle die is really big, and so I'm going to do something else for this instead. So I'm going to mark off first on this spare piece of paper where I want that edge to be, how high I want that sand to go up. I've got a few elements from the stamp set that I can put sitting in the sand. Most of them I do want just to be in the water, so I don't want this to take up too much room at the bottom of the card, but I do want a little bit of sand, enough that I can just put the sentiment and some critters on it. So I've made my own ocean wave. I just took a pencil and did a rough outline of just a scallop, a loose scallop. And then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and cut this. The trick to this is just keeping the paper very steady, very flat to my cutting mat and pushing really hard on it so it doesn't slip. and then just running that knife along the edge. Even if the line isn't perfect to my pencil line, that's okay, as long as that cut is really smooth and fluid. So I think that's looking pretty good. I'm going to come in with a vintage photo and create that sand look. And so a blended background for this piece as well. And this is also on mixed media cardstock. And so I find mixed media is the best to use for distressing because I really like the blends that I can get. And I usually use the Strathmore brand. I'll put a link in the description below if you're interested in checking it out. So I'm going to come in off the top edge. And so I want the top edge to be the darkest part of my Distress Ink blend. And then right now I'm looking to fade it off into white. So I'm just giving it kind of a shadow on the upper edge just to make that edge really pop and stand out when it's on the background. So as I'm doing this, I'm really putting a strong concentration of ink really on that upper edge, just trying to really create that gradient from a really dark to the white. And so I'm just testing it with my background. I feel like I got a little bit more to go. It's starting to build up, but it's just not there yet. So I'll add some more ink and be a little more generous with it and put some more down. So you can see that it's getting darker as I build it up, and it's still fading into white, but it's really not sitting right with me. It just didn't feel complete. So I decided to come in with my squeezed lemonade and add that as the bottom color instead of leaving it white. I just found that the white was too stark, and because the rest of the background was all colored, it all had a treatment, it just felt like this was an unconsidered element, like it wasn't finished. So the minute I added that squeezed lemonade, it just made that vintage photo color pop, and it just looks so nice. I thought that this was a nice compliment, and it didn't take a lot of the squeezed lemonade to really complete this look. And I love that it makes the sand feel a little bit more golden, so I'm really happy that I tried this. So now, because my vintage photo distress ink is actually a distress oxide ink, so it's a little more opaque, it gave more of an even line, less of a blend between those two colors. One's a distress oxide and one's just a distress ink. And so what I did is I came back over with that vintage photo and blended that line one more time, and then I was able to blend it evenly. So now I'm going to let that set aside to dry as well, and I'm going to work on my stamps next and my Copic Coloring. Now I've separated out the Copic Coloring in another video, so if you'd like to check that out, I do full real time. I don't speed it up or cut pieces out. And you can watch the entire time lapse of that while I talk through it. And I'll link it at the end of this video, and I'll put it in a card and in the description below too. But this is a quick look at some of the Copic Coloring that I did for these critters. And so I really tried to vary the colors and also thinking about the background that I had already created and what kind of colors I wanted to use that would help those critters pop off that background. Because the background is pretty saturated and it's bright enough on its own. So I really wanted these little guys to kind of have their own light shining on them and be a little bit more visually punchy. And so really thinking about what colors would stand out the most and really help them to elevate off the scene. So I had fun coloring these, and I chose lots of different colors to get them all glammed up with. And so I did actually end up coloring a few more than I used, but what I did is I stamped out the whole set to begin because I didn't want to limit myself because there's so many elements to the scene. I kind of just wanted to color them all and then work with them after, or once I got them cut out, and decide which ones fit the best. I didn't want to cram it too full just by trying to include everything for the point of doing that. I really wanted to make sure I had a balanced scene. So I really took my time and used each element to figure out how I wanted that card to lay out. And then any that I don't use, I just put them in the back of my stamp envelope, and so I have them for another card if I need them. So as a finishing touch, I'm coming in with my white gel pen and just adding some highlights to the critters. And I really like this because it kind of gives them more of a cartoon look. They look more bubbly, and I really like that kind of gummy sheen that it gives them. So now they're ready to be popped out. I've got them all colored, and so I'm going to use those wafer dies and just place them all on top of the little critters and run them through my Sizzix Big Kick machine. So here I have them all cut out, and I'm just popping them out of the dies. So now I'm ready to start assembling and working on my background and just working on the overall composition. So I'm going to get my sand applied first. I'm going to use my tape roller and run it generally near the top and a little bit in the middle. I know I have extra overhang that I'll have to trim, but I'm not too worried about that at this point. So I have that in place, and then I'm going to trim off the overhang now. And so I'm going to use my ruler and X-Acto knife. And to get a flush cut, you'll notice that I use my blade to line up my ruler to the back layer of the card. That's the clean cut edge that I want to match my trim to. So just getting those extra pieces cut off. And then this way it's nice and flush. It doesn't look like I tried to piece it together after it was already cut to size. This way it's cut exactly the same size as that background. So now the fun part is putting on the critters and deciding where I want them to go. I want to be mindful of where my sentiment's going to go as well to make sure I leave enough room for that. And just kind of getting everything flowing nicely in the layout and making sure every little critter has enough space, visual space, that he doesn't feel overcrowded. And so here I'm just kind of playing with some of the composition. I really like the dolphin up in the left corner, and I really like the turtle kind of coming down off the right. They feel really nice in that space. It was more the middle I had a little struggle with, but I was able to get the balance worked out where I was happy. So now I'm just putting my sentiment in for position. If you have a long sentiment, I find it's easier if you lay it on your desk and then you pick it up with your acrylic block instead of trying to put it on your acrylic block. I find that way it doesn't bend, it lays down straight, and you're able to get it nice and even, and it's not got a wiggly baseline at all. And that can sometimes happen if you try to put it on your acrylic block by hand. So I've staggered the sentiment and it fits really nice at the bottom. I still have lots of sand room to put some of the elements. And I like that I have my little crab or snail, whatever that is, kind of sitting in the sand, but his shell peeks out into the ocean. And I'm going to do that same technique with my seaweed so that it's kind of taking up both spaces or occupying both spaces. And that way there's not so much of a hard visual break. That kind of creates more harmony to the scene because it's drawing or tying those two pieces together, the background ocean and the sand. It just kind of marries those two pieces together and brings the card together overall easier visually. And so I'm using foam tape for all of these guys just to give them a little bit of an elevation. And I really like foam tape. I use it a lot, and I find it's really fun to make those critters pop especially. So now that I have that done, I'm going to come in with my gel pen and just kind of add some ocean waves, just some water movement, I guess. And this also helps me to create some composition in my scene to help with eye movement and direction. Now my gel pen's getting pretty tired. I don't find these last very long or they work as well as I would like them to, so I did find I had to go over the lines a couple times to get a nice white line out of it. And then I also created some bubbles, some little air bubbles coming off some of the critters, just for a few different elements in that background. And then coming in with my Tri Plus fine liners, I'm just adding some speckles in the sand as well for some texture. Mostly putting them around the elements and around the base of the sentiment. And again, this helps for directional eye movement as well and composition. So now I'm ready to put the card together. Everything's all done. I'm going to use my tape roller and just line the perimeter of the card. And then usually in the center, I either do an X or just 3 lines, which in this case, I'm going to do 3 lines. And that I find that that's plenty enough to make it stick really well and no loose spots come out. So lining this up on the folded edge, because the folded edge is the only edge I can't trim. I can trim any others that come out crooked, but I can't trim that folded edge. So I line it up on the folded edge and then press it together. And so my card is ready to give to my nephew. So here's a look at the final card. I had a lot of fun creating this card. I love how it turned out. I really love the colors. And I was very excited to give it to him. If you want to see the Copic Coloring video, don't forget you can check that out at the end of this video. If you did like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified as I post more videos to my channel. Thank you so much for watching.